Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering my pick for the best rogue build in Baldur's Gate 3. This is an update video in my Simple Builds series, and Rogue is a really interesting class for that series because I've been focusing on monoclass characters for the Simple Build guides. We're just doing every class in turn. And Rogue is the class that benefits the most from multiclassing of any character in the game. In fact, if you've spent any time looking at Baldur's Gate 3 build guides, you've probably heard people angrily declare that Rogue, 12 levels of Rogue is unplayable trash, probably while frothing at the mouth and hurling their controller at the wall of their mom's basement. Needless to say, I disagree with this take. 12 levels of Rogue is absolutely a powerful and viable character that will see you through Honor Mode very easily. But it does come from a piece of true information, which is that Rogue is a very front-loaded class. Rogue gets a lot of its power budget in the first 3 levels of the class, so when we're building a Rogue that wants to be as powerful as possible and as useful for Honor Mode as possible, we need to focus on emphasizing the incredible strengths that you get early on in the build in order to make our character as effective as it can, and create a versatile, powerful rogue that will help your party out of bad situations, cover your party's skill needs, and overall give you a smooth and safe ride through Honor Mode as a true rogue should. So what do rogues bring to the table? Well, in a word, versatility. Rogues can do pretty much anything that your party needs. They have access to any or even all of the skills that you need for a playthrough, and some of the best skill access in the game, because they get expertise in skills, and late in the game they become incapable of failing skill rolls, meaning that you will always succeed on important skill checks when you have a rogue in your party. Rogues are also incredibly difficult to kill, due to their being a dexterity-based character, and having high armor class and initiative as a result of that, combined with their ability to reduce incoming damage, and to the fact that we will be operating at range and have incredible mobility, rogues are very hard to actually pin down when it comes to enemy actions, and can get your party out of bad situations. If the fight starts turning against you, a rogue is one of the go-to characters for getting away so that you can come back and fight another day. Rogues also have good upfront damage with their sneak attacks, so they can eliminate priority targets at the beginning of combat, and overall, because of the incredible action economy manipulation that rogues get access to, being able to do things that take other characters a full action in a bonus action, and then also getting more bonus actions as we go through the game, you're going to be able to do multiple things per turn, which enables you to make very clever plays. Because rogues have lower damage output than other martial characters, they're a character that doesn't cast spells and fights by doing physical damage, but they do a little bit less of it than more dedicated damage dealers. You do need to play rogues more cleverly than you need to play other characters, and that's part of where their reputation as a weak class comes from. But what rogues give you is lots of tools to be clever. So if you want to feel like you are a tactical genius playing the game in an extremely clever way, Rogue gives you the tools and the opportunities to do that, and backs it up with the abilities to give you tactical options at every moment. You will never have a turn where your rogue just has nothing relevant to do. That's just not something that can really happen to a rogue, because they have so many options, so many actions, and so many different ways to use those actions. We're using Astarion as the example character here, because of course he is the rogue of the party, but also because, due to his unique story abilities, he's actually the best rogue, and indeed the best companion for any martial class. His ability to gain additional hit chance and skill checks in the early game, and his late game story events that give him the option of adding additional damage to each of his attacks, make him perfect for a rogue, and so his natural abilities synergize extremely well with the class. If you're building this as a custom character, there's a couple things that you're looking for from your race selection. Firstly, rogues benefit a ton if they can get shield proficiency or medium armor proficiency from their race. If you're staying monoclass rogue, you don't get these proficiencies naturally, but they're both incredibly useful for rogues throughout the course of the game. In particular, shield proficiency is very good because you can have a shield equipped alongside ranged weapons and still get the armor class benefit of the shield, getting you significantly more survivability effectively for free. You also are very incentivized when picking a race to pick one with dark vision. rogues, true to their name, are going to spend a lot of time sneaking around in the dark. One of your common play patterns is going to be to sneak around the outside of combat, extinguishing torches so that you're in the dark, and fighting enemies in darkness. Being able to see in the dark naturally helps a ton with that, though there are, of course, ways in the game to magically gain that ability, so it's not required, but it definitely makes your play pattern smoother. For that reason, there's one race that stands head and shoulders above the others for rogues, in my opinion, and that is Wood Half-Elf. You get dark vision, you get shield proficiency, and you get 5 feet of additional movement speed, which gets multiplied with Rogue's ability to move many times per turn, because Rogue can dash as a bonus action. So you use all of the powerful abilities of that race extremely well when you're playing a rogue. Other great options include Githyanki, because you get medium armor, and the Githyanki natural abilities are great. Also, Githyanki's astral knowledge lets you cover even more of the skill requirements for your party. Or Dwergar, because the ability to turn invisible anytime you're not in combat is extremely powerful, of course, for a character that wants to stay stealthy. For our ability scores, there are really 3 different ways we can build this character, and so right at the start you're going to have to make a fairly important decision. And that is, will your rogue be the character that's making most of the dialogue checks for your parties, the so-called party face? If so, you're going to want to put points in charisma and take dialogue skills with your skill selection, so you need to decide that when you're actually building the character, if they're going to be doing the talking. If you are playing as a party face, then you're going to want to take... also notice that these starting attribute spreads are extremely bad, so we definitely want to change them as much as we can. If you are playing the character as a party face, then you're going to want to take 16 dexterity, 16 constitution, 14 charisma, and 12 wisdom. This gives you decent saving throws. Wisdom is the most important saving throw in the game, and reasonable charisma, combined with your ability to take expertise in persuasion, so you can boost your persuasion even further. You'll be passing all the dialogue skills that you need. If your character isn't going to be making most of the dialogue checks for your party, then you have a couple other options. We can drop our charisma to 8 because we no longer need it, and we can either take the greedy attribute split or the sort of more standard attribute split. For the standard attribute split, you're just going to put 12 points into strength and then 14 points into wisdom. The 12 points in strength just give you more carry weight and a little more jump distance, which can make your play through the game just a little bit smoother. So if you feel like that is something that you care about a lot, then this is the attribute spread for you. But rogues get the ability to take the greediest attribute split in the game and maximize 3 stats as much as possible, because rogues are entirely single attribute dependent, or SAD. They only care about dexterity, so you can take 17 dexterity, 16 constitution, and 15 wisdom, then we'll even out these odd numbers later on in the game. Of course, you can take the one and respec into the other, but this is the way we get the highest 3 possible attribute points in the game, so this attribute spread is going to let us maximize wisdom, which is very important because rogues want that wisdom saving throw as much as possible. For our skill selection, we are always going to want to place 1 proficiency and expertise in sleight of hand. One of the great things about being a rogue is you get expertise in sleight of hand, which lets you disarm locks or pick locks and disarm traps as easily as possible, and succeeding on lockpicking and trap disarming is very important as you make your way through the game, of course. It gives you access to more loot and prevents you from accidentally wiping your party when a boulder falls on your head. You also are always going to want stealth proficiency, but if you are if you are the party face for your party, I highly recommend putting the expertise in persuasion rather than in stealth. If you aren't the party face for your party, then you want to put your second expertise, which just doubles your proficiency bonus to your skill, into stealth. This gives you a lot of options for later in the game. Stealth is less important. The actual stealth skill is less important in Baldur's Gate 3 than you might think, because there's a lot of ways to avoid ever having to roll this, which we'll talk about later, but still can be very useful. And you're going to want acrobatics to prevent you from being pushed off of cliffs. Finally, the last point you can put into something like investigation. It's the only other skill that's ever rolled outside of conversations here. So if you're not the party face, you get a couple skills that just give you a few extra bonuses. Things like athletics and investigation are not going to be huge picks for your character. So what I recommend is that even if you aren't going to be the party face, you can still put points into persuasion just in case you get thrust into a dialogue by accident. Since your rogue will be scouting ahead a lot of the time, it will sometimes end up in dialogues that you didn't intend to end up into, most likely. So having at least some skill points to back that up when like story events trigger, having at least some skill points to back that up can still be useful. Finally, at first level, we don't have any other decisions to make, but rogues at first level get access to sneak attack, which is such an important mechanic for them that I want to take a moment to talk about it. Sneak attack is the core of your rogue's damage. Being that they are attacking from shadows, they get to hit an enemy in a vulnerable location, dealing extra damage to them. At first level, this is an extra d6 of damage, and at every odd level of rogue that you take, it goes up an extra d6. Because this is damage dice, this damage is also doubled on critical hits, so critical sneak attacks can do a tremendous amount of damage and can drop enemies from full to zero almost immediately. There are two ways to trigger sneak attack. Either you can have advantage on the attack roll, and there's a lot of ways to get this, but the most common is either attacking from a dark area, so attacking from a completely unlit area, against an enemy that doesn't have dark vision, which is why it's so good for our character to be able to see in the dark, and or being hidden. If you use the hide action, you become hidden, and then your next attack has advantage. There's a bunch of other ways to get this, like becoming invisible, blinding the enemy, trapping them in an entangle, the enemy being prone, lots of other ways to get advantage on attack, and therefore trigger sneak attack, and you will probably use many of those ways to get this advantage over the course of your run, because it's very important to do that. The second way to trigger sneak attack is to have an ally next to the enemy, and if you have an ally next to the enemy, you don't need advantage on the attack, you just need to not have disadvantage. So as long as you have a melee ally who can move next to enemies, you'll be able to maximize your damage output, so you really want to pair your rogue with a melee character that has high initiative. If both the rogue and a melee ally win initiative, go before any of the enemies go, you can move your melee character adjacent to the most important enemy, and then have your rogue attack them, gaining their sneak attack damage, and presumably killing them before that enemy ever gets a turn. So rogues really want to work with a buddy in order to take down distracted enemies as much as they can. It's important to familiarize yourself with both of these ways of triggering sneak attack, because you only get sneak attack once per turn, and it's the core of rogue's damage. You're reliant on it in order to deal damage, so you want to be making certain that you trigger it every single turn of every combat that you're in. So we want to maximize our potential to do that in order to make our character as effective as possible. With that, we have completed the first level of our rogue, so let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we again have no decisions to make, but we get 3 more incredibly important abilities for our rogue. We gain the ability to do Cunning Action, Hide, Dash, or Disengage, and the Cunning Action version of these abilities means that you can do them as a bonus action. Normally, all 3 of these abilities require a character's action, but rogues get to do them as a bonus action, so they can do them multiple times per turn, because you can still do them as an action, or they can do them and still make an attack or perform another important action in a turn. This makes Rogue one of the most mobile classes in the game, because you can dash up to 3 times per turn at this level if you use both your action and bonus action to dash. You can move 3 times your movement speed, which increases your movement speed to phenomenal levels and can let you cross the battlefield immediately. And you can hide as a bonus action, which means a number of very important things for your character. You can make an attack and then hide so that an enemy will not be able to retaliate, or you can hide and then make an attack so you have advantage on the attack. Both of those are very powerful options that will allow your character to do damage more consistently or stay much safer. Finally, you get bonus action Disengage, or Cunning Action Disengage, which will let you spend your bonus action to not trigger opportunity attacks when you are running away from a melee enemy. That can be very important as well, because we're planning to make this a ranged character so we can more reliably proc our sneak attack and just do more damage overall. And so being able to get away from melee enemies can be pretty important. Of the three abilities, Disengage is the one you're going to use the least, because often it's right just to walk away and tank the attack of opportunity rather than use Cunning Action Disengage, because you have a better use for your bonus action to do damage or hide or something along those lines. But all three of these will come up all the time throughout the entire game, so again, very important to keep in mind that you have these mobility options and the ability to hide, get away from enemy attention, and so on, all of which are extremely powerful combat options throughout the entirety of the game. At character level 3, we get an additional sneak attack die, so our sneak attack goes up from 1d6 to 2d6, which is very important. It's going to increase our damage significantly, and that will continue to happen every odd level as we level up. But more importantly than that, we also get our subclass. All three of the rogue subclasses are very powerful and very viable. Rogue puts a lot of the power budget of the class, like the total power that you're going to gain from taking Rogue over the course of 12 levels. A lot of the power of that class comes in these level 3 subclass abilities, and all three of them are very good. Assassin gives you automatic critical hits and lets you make additional attacks before combat starts and then still attack in the first round of combat. Arcane Trickster gives you great defensive options because you can take utility spells, including Shield, to make yourself extremely difficult to kill, and Thief gives you an additional bonus action. To maximize the flexibility, versatility, and overall damage of our character, we're going to take Thief for this build, because not only is it the roguiest rogue, it also gives you the most options for doing cool things in combat. An additional bonus action can be used, of course, to do additional cunning actions. It can also be used to do additional offhand attacks if you're dual wielding. So right away we've gone to having 3 attacks in a round. That means that we're extremely reliable at landing our sneak attack, because 3 chances to hit an enemy in every turn means that at least one of those is very likely to land, and so we're going to be able to trigger sneak attack extremely reliably, and it increases the chances dramatically of one of those shots being a critical hit, meaning that we're going to be able to trigger critical sneak attacks much more reliably. Thief therefore gives you a lot of sustained damage, because just the getting to shoot with your offhand weapon multiple times per turn means that you are just doing the most possible damage, and gives you a ton of utility, mobility, and survivability because the bonus action is so powerful for so many things. You can use it to dash, you can use it to hide, you can use it to drink a potion, you can use it to attack. All of those are very powerful uses for this ability, and of course there are other things like items that are activated with a bonus action powers that you'll get on in the throughout the course of the game from story events, all of which benefit from having multiple bonus actions, so this just gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility, and is the one that we're going to go with. At character level 4, we get access to our very first feat, which we will get 4 of, unlike the normal 3, because rogues get an additional feat as they level up. So that gives us a little more flexibility with which feats we're going to take. However, we're not going to be flexible with the first one. There's a correct feat to take here, and that feat is Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter, when we are making 3 attacks per round, adds 30 damage to our attacks to our damage output per round. That means that we're, at this point, doing more damage than almost any other character in the game, provided that we can hit our attacks. Luckily, we're pretty good at doing that, because we can make our attacks with advantage a lot of the time, thanks to standing in darkened areas or being hidden before combat starts. We'll have advantage on a lot of our attacks. Rogues also, because of their high mobility, can often be on high ground to gain additional hit chances on their attacks as well. Make sure that you're positioning your rogue in order to mitigate this hit chance penalty. Now, the penalty for rogues is real, so you do need to be a little bit careful in order to maximize the benefits of Sharpshooter, but even this early in the game, Sharpshooter is going to increase your average damage significantly, so only turn it off if an enemy is at low health and you just need a little bit of damage to finish them off. Otherwise, you're going to do more average damage by leaving Sharpshooter on pretty much all the time. I think unless your hit chance against that enemy is 30% or lower, you should leave Sharpshooter on. If it's 30% or lower, you should turn it off. Now, Sharpshooter does have an additional issue for rogues, which is that if you miss all of your attacks in a round, you lose out on sneak attack. So often, if you have missed 2 of your 3 attacks in a round and haven't gotten with Sharpshooter and haven't gotten to apply your sneak attack, it can be worth it to turn it off for the very last attack in order to try to guarantee that you land your sneak attack in that turn. But overall, Sharpshooter is still going to increase your damage output massively and is worth picking up at this level for sure. At character level 5, we get to increase our sneak attack damage from 2d6 to 3d6, so we're going to kill enemies just that much faster. 1d6 additional sneak attack damage doesn't sound like much, but every little bit helps, and remember it all gets doubled when you score a critical hit, which we're quite good at doing. So just every little bit of additional burst to damage can help us kill enemies that much faster. The other thing we get at character level 5 is Uncanny Dodge. Uncanny Dodge is a reaction. It requires your reaction for the turn, and it halves incoming damage from an enemy attack. You don't get to choose which attack it targets. Unlike other reactions in the game, it doesn't use the reaction menu for some reason, so it always activates against the first enemy attack in a given round. Excuse me, I had to cut the video briefly for a gigantic sneeze. Veterans of the channel will know that that does happen sometimes, but we're back in it. So, Uncanny Dodge always works against the first enemy attack in a given round. That means that it is not as reliable as the tabletop version, where you get to decide when you're going to use it, but still reduces incoming damage significantly. Rogues, as you can see, don't get a ton of hit points. Compared to other martial classes, we have fewer hit points at this level than they would, but with our high armor class, due to being a dexterity-based class, and our ability to reduce incoming damage with Uncanny Dodge, as well as our mobility and ability to stay stealthed, we are significantly harder to kill than just about any other character in the game. You will alternate between using Uncanny Dodge to tank damage for your team that would do twice as much damage against any other character, so you want to take 1 attack per turn with your rogue if possible to maximize your party's hit points, and also use Hide in order to avoid attacks entirely if your hit points start being in danger. You can also heal very efficiently because you have multiple bonus actions, so you can always drink a potion with one of those bonus actions if you start to get low, and those potions are worth more because the hit points are effectively multiplied by the Uncanny Dodge feature. So all of that works together very well to make your rogue extremely difficult to take down. The bonus sneak attack damage also makes you just better at killing things, so rogue level 5 is a pretty good level for us. At character level 6, we don't learn any more combat abilities, but we do get expertise in 2 more skills, increasing our ability with these skills even more so. So we're going to be able to make our skill checks just that much more reliably. With Astarion, we have a racial proficiency in perception, so I recommend putting your expertise into perception. If you're not Astarion or a character that gets perception from their race, then you're going to want to put your expertise in really just any skills that you are actually rolling, probably acrobatics and investigation if you're not a party face. But of course, if you are the party face, this lets you get expertise in all of the dialogue skills, meaning that you can pass dialogue skills extremely reliably, more reliably than pretty much any other character in the game, even characters that are fully spec'd into charisma, because your skills will be higher, so you're going to roll those skill checks successfully even more than they will. This just lets us cover even more of the bases for our party, but not a significant boost to our combat power, so let's move on to level 7. And at level 7, we get Evasion. Evasion is a very cool ability for rogues that gives us the ability to take 0 damage whenever we make a successful dexterity saving throw against a spell or other effect that would deal damage to that would normally deal half damage on a save. Something like a fireball does half damage when you save, and we are going to take 0 damage from that, making us extremely resilient to just about every damaging spell in the game. Even if we fail the saving throw, which is unlikely because we have high dexterity and proficiency in dexterity saves, so our dexterity saves are going to be very good, we still take half damage. So this is another way that rogues' hit points get effectively multiplied. Even though we have a relatively low hit point total, with evasion and uncanny dodge, we multiply that total significantly, and these multipliers are also really good when combined with anything that increases our hit point total, like aid or temporary hit points from an ally. So rogues make excellent recipients for buffs to their hit points. Things like aid, hero's feast, and so on are even better for rogues than they are for other characters because they multiply the value of those hit points whenever they receive them, thanks to these defensive abilities. At rogue level 8, we get our second feat, and we're just going to take an ability improvement to maximize our dexterity, even out these numbers, and get wisdom up to 16. An alternative to this is to, if we took 14 wisdom instead of 15, and still 17 dexterity, and if we're playing Astarion or another race that doesn't naturally get medium armor and shield proficiency, and/or shield proficiency, is to take the moderately armored feat and just boost our dexterity to 18. You can take 2 points out of wisdom and put them anywhere else. It doesn't really matter where you put them, probably charisma, just in case you end up in dialogue. And get your dexterity up to 18 while gaining access to medium armor and shields, which makes you significantly harder to kill. This is great because it still boosts your dexterity. For this version of the build, I'm going to just take an ability improvement to even out the odd numbers, but moderately armored is very good for Astarion in particular as a rogue, because he normally doesn't get proficiency in those weapons and armor. So we're going to consider taking that as well for him to make him even more resilient. At rogue level 9, we get an additional sneak attack die, going up to 5d6 sneak attack, and we also get from our Thief Rogue class features Supreme Sneak, which gives us the ability to turn invisible once per short rest. Unlike a lot of these other class feature invisibilities, this one isn't restricted. You can just turn invisible, and that's pretty reasonable. Obviously, there's a lot of other ways to turn invisible in the game, but getting it for free on a short rest, so it's not requiring a spell slot from an ally, or a potion, or a scroll in order to cast invisibility, and doesn't require concentration from an ally or anything like that, is pretty useful. Lets you get into position even in areas that are hard to sneak in, lets you position before combat, also lets you just turn invisible and run away if things are going badly, which can be very useful in some circumstances, of course. So this ability, not a major upgrade, but definitely useful. At character level 10, rogues get another pretty significant boost to their character, which is that they get a bonus feat. Most characters only get access to 3 feats throughout the course of the game. Rogues get 4 because they get an extra at level 10. It's not quite as good as fighters who get the extra at level 6, much earlier in their level progression, but this is still a really powerful boost for sticking in rogue this long because feats are just incredibly strong, so the ability to take more of them is very valuable. For our feat here, we're just going to take an ability improvement and max out our dexterity so that we do more damage and hit our attacks that much more reliably. The thing with rogue is you just want to reliably land your attacks. That's the most important thing for your character, is just hitting with your attacks, because all of our damage comes from sharpshooter and comes from sneak attack, so we just need to hit with our attacks. Increasing our dexterity makes that more likely. Other than that, no decisions to make at level 10, so let's move on to level 11. And at rogue level 11, we get the awesome ability Reliable Talent. This is the rogue's capstone ability, which allows you to always roll a 10 or higher whenever you make a skill check that you're proficient with. This eliminates natural ones and critical failures, completely removes the potential for failing most checks. Because you have expertise in so many skills, and because you are so good at passing skill checks, and because you cover such a wide variety of skills, this means that your party will basically no longer be capable of failing skill checks for the rest of the game. Reliable Talent not only increases the average result of your skill checks significantly, it removes the minimum results of your skill checks, and so that means that you almost always will be 100% guaranteed to pass most skill checks in the game, and you can use this combined with, and because it also increases the average, even if you aren't guaranteed to pass it, you can use it alongside guidance and enhanceability, effects like that, that make you more likely to succeed on skill checks, to succeed on pretty much every skill check in the game with certainty. The inspirations that you've been collecting throughout the game also help with reliable talent rerolls as well, because even if you need a very high roll on the die, when you can only roll a 10 or higher, you are very likely to actually hit that roll. So don't underestimate this ability, and make sure that your rogue is always the one making skill checks, because reliable talent means that they're so good at them. Finally, at character level 12, we get access to our very last feat, and there are a lot of good options that we can take for feats here. One that you might be wondering why we haven't taken it is Crossbow Expert, which allows us to make crossbow attacks within melee range without disadvantage. Since this build is going to be using two-hand crossbows, the feat with crossbow in the name sure seems like a natural pick. I am not a huge fan of this feat. I think that spending an entire feat on making crossbow attacks in melee range is typically a waste, and you are better off using Cunning Action Disengage to just move away if you want to evade the opportunity attack, or just tanking the opportunity attack. Remember, you have Uncanny Dodge, so you're taking half damage from most enemies, so often I think it's better just to take the damage just by walking away and then just make your normal crossbow attacks, rather than invest an entire feat into not having to do that. Most of the time, enemies will find it difficult to close to melee distance with your rogue anyways, because you're so mobile and you'll be hidden a lot of the time and everything like that. So I don't like Crossbow Expert, but if you are finding that you're getting caught up in melee a lot, then this can definitely be a good pick and can make your gameplay smoother. Another feat that you're probably wondering about, because it comes up so often in honor mode runs, is Alert. Since this is a dexterity-based build, I find Alert less important for this build, and also a lot of the best gear for us just naturally has plus initiative on it, so we're going to end up with pretty good initiative rolls regardless. That being said, winning initiative with 100% certainty is always good, so Alert is never a bad pick, and you can absolutely pick it up. But because we're a rogue, we do get a lot of flexibility as to which our last ability, which our last feat will be, and it would be a shame not to use that to take some feats that I think don't often see the light of day, but are pretty fun. One of these is Lucky, which can make you even better at guaranteeing that things go your way. The luck points are very valuable and give you a ton of reliability for your character, which is, of course, something that rogues want. Another good option for a rogue is Mobile, which gives you 10 feet of additional movement speed, but remember we can move many times per turn, so that's basically 30 feet of additional movement speed, and makes us immune to being slowed by difficult terrain. That gives us a lot of extra mobility. I think that this is a decent option. It's not what I would say is the strongest possible option, but it's definitely a good one. Another good option for your rogue, actually, is one that you almost never see, but actually is quite good for rogues, and that is Tough. Just increasing your total hit points by 24 is pretty valuable for rogues. Remember, we multiply our hit point total significantly because of high AC, because of Uncanny Dodge, because of evasion. 24 additional hit points gives us a lot more leeway to play with without being in any danger of dying. Of these, I'm going to recommend that you take Lucky, but all of those are great options that will give you a ton of additional value for your character, and you have a little bit of room to play with what feat you want at this point in the game, so you should definitely take it based on what you feel your party needs, given how the game has played out up to this point. Lucky, I think, will always be a good option, so that's what I'm going to recommend as a default pick. Alright, that is 12 levels of Rogue, but let's see if we can power up the character even further by choosing specific items, and we will of course discuss good multiclasses, because multiclassing Rogue is a very powerful option. For items for this character, there's really 3 categories of items that we are looking for. Firstly, of course, we need our hand crossbows. These are going to be our main weapons, and we want to have 2 of them so that we can maximize our number of offhand attacks. Because you have more offhand attacks than you do main hand attacks, you want your better crossbow in your offhand rather than in your main hand in order to maximize your chance of doing damage. So keep that in mind. You actually want to use your higher tier weapon in your offhand since you attack with it more often. You can do that with bonus action and you get 2 of them. The numbers that you're looking at on these crossbows, the only number that you actually care about is the weapon enchantment number, because the only thing that rogues care about when selecting weapons is the chance to hit. The actual weapon itself is not a significant component of your damage. You just want to reliably land your sharpshooter attacks and reliably land your sneak attacks. So the ability to actually hit your attacks is the most important thing when it comes to selecting weapons. So you're looking for weapon enchantments, and of course any weapons that have bonus chances to hit on top of that. To combine with that, of course, you want to have any gear that increases your chance to hit. Things like the marksmanship hat give you bonuses to your ranged attack rolls, and because the actually hitting your attacks is the main thing that determines how much you do in combat, you just want to gear for maximizing your chances of hitting your attack. Another thing that helps you out a lot is increasing your chances of critically hitting. Any critical hit that you get not only automatically hits, so you've accomplished your goal of getting hit whenever you critically hit, it also doubles your damage. That lets you use sneak attack on the critical hit and double your sneak attack damage. 6d6 doubled to 12d6 is super valuable, so you want to be trying to trigger as many critical hits as possible. Items like the Shade Slayer cloak or anything that increases the chance of you rolling a critical hit is very important for this character. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you have a melee weapon equipped, you benefit from the passive benefits of the melee weapon, even if you're actually using your ranged weapons. So items like the Knife of the Undermountain King, that reduce your required number to critically hit, you can have equipped and still gain the benefits of those with ranged attacks. It also is nice just to have a melee weapon equipped, because we didn't take Crossbow Expert, but we can still just make melee weapon attacks with a short sword or a dagger, any finesse weapon, and get our sneak attack damage if we're alongside an ally or if we have advantage on the attack. And since most of our damage comes from sneak attack, that can still be a very viable way to deal damage with this character in melee, even on into the late game. Finally, in addition to hit chance and critical hit chance, the only other thing that we want to add is damage dice. So anything that adds additional damage dice to our attacks, like the Flawed Helldusk gloves, is great. Since we're going to be fishing for critical hits so often, these additional damage dice will be doubled. Flat damage bonuses, like the Gloves of Archery, are not doubled when they critically hit, but damage dice are. So we're looking for anything that has a variable amount of damage added to all of our attacks, and that will increase our damage output significantly. Finally, utility items, things that increase our armor class or saving throws, are very good. If you have shield proficiency, you can wear a shield and gain the armor class benefits of a shield while using your ranged weapons. So that's why it's so good to have shield proficiency, because you can increase your armor class significantly. And items that provide spells that are that you don't have easy access to normally, things like Misty Step that are just very good for positioning, are very valuable items for this character as well. Special shout out also to the armor that we're wearing, one that I don't see recommended that often, which is a very solid mid-game armor. The Elegant Studded Leather gives us bonus to our initiative, so we're going to be able to win initiative, go first, and win in combat more often, and gives us the shield spell, which makes us significantly harder to kill, because we can use shield as a reaction to cause enemy attacks to miss. When you're actually playing Rogue, there are 3 super important interface issues that you need to be aware of, because the game has included some traps for the unwary or for new players. The very first is how to hide. Obviously, hiding is a very important component of playing a rogue, so understanding the stealth mechanics is very important. When you're playing a rogue and you hide, you have to make a stealth check. But if you hide outside of the red enemy vision cone, you never have to roll stealth, so you can succeed with 100% certainty on your hide checks when enemies can't see you. To see the enemy vision cone, on PC, by default you hold Shift. I'm not 100% sure what the console button is, and this will show you whether you're going to have to roll a stealth check to hide. However, there is a trick to this, which is that by default, if you hit Shift and then the hide button, your whole party hides, and so then they will all have to roll stealth checks. But if just Astarion hides, he doesn't have to roll a stealth check at all, because he was not inside any enemy vision cone. So you want to remove your finger from shift. If you only want one character to hide, you want to remove your finger from shift before hitting the hide key in order to guarantee that you won't have to roll stealth checks or accidentally cause the rest of your party to hide. Secondly, you want to ensure that the game doesn't waste your sneak attack, and you get to use it on the target that you actually want to use it on. To ensure this, you want to open your character sheet, go to your spellbook, go to the Reactions tab, and make sure that all of your reactions are set to On and set to Ask. If you don't have them on Ask, the game will use Sneak Attack on the first eligible attack in a round, which will not necessarily be the best target. If you set it to Ask, then when you stealth and attack a creature, using a normal attack, not the Sneak Attack button, the game will ask you, I have to actually hide here, the game will ask you if you want to sneak attack by popping up this window. The reason this is so important is that sneak attack gets doubled when you critically hit, so you want to ensure that you are using sneak attack when you critical hit as much as possible. So often you don't want to use it on your first attack in a round, because subsequent attacks, if you can still sneak attack on them, might be critical hits, and then you can guarantee that you're doubling the damage. It's very important and increases your damage significantly. Finally, you can see we're running into the third interface issue that I wanted to talk about, which is that, again, you want control over what your character is doing, so you want to turn this button off, toggle dual wielding. If it's on and shows the double sword there, then whenever you make an attack, the game will automatically use your bonus action to make an offhand attack as well, which sometimes you want that bonus action for dashing, sometimes you want to attack a different character with your bonus action, and so on. So you absolutely want to make sure that you have control over all of your actions by turning off dual wielding, setting your sneak attack to reaction, and learning exactly how the stealth system works, all of which are very important interface issues to know about when you're playing Rogue, and can get you in trouble if you don't pay attention to them. Finally, for multiclassing Rogue, Rogue is one of the classes that multiclasses the absolute best in the entire game. So I'm not going to go over every possible multiclass option. You can find that in the dozens of guides that I've done to multiclassed Rogues, but I'll mention a couple that are really valuable for Rogues. The main thing holding Rogue back, or the main weakness of the class, is that it's a martial character that doesn't get the extra attack feature, so is making fewer attacks than most other martial characters. We make up for that with our bonus action offhand attacks, but more attacks is always good. So 5 levels of fighter or 5 levels of ranger can give us access to extra attack, while also powering up our character. Fighter and ranger also get access to fighting styles, which can boost your character significantly through the archery fighting style, which, again, the only thing we care about is hitting our attacks, and archery fighting style makes us so much better at hitting our attacks that boosting our ranged attack rolls is super valuable. Or the 2 weapon fighting style, which lets us add our dexterity to our offhand attack damage. This basically increases our damage by 10 per turn, because we're making 2 offhand attacks with Thief Rogue. So that gives us a significant damage boost to our character by adding our dexterity to our offhand attack damage. We make our character wildly better at outputting damage, especially if you get this early. So taking fighter and or ranger, often you will want to take, say, 5 levels of ranger and 3 levels of fighter in order to get battle master maneuvers, something like that, and you can see builds that I've done to that effect can power up this character quite a lot through access to extra attack and the fighting styles that those characters get access to. You can also boost Rogue with any other martial class. Monks or paladins work extremely well, though they tend to be more focused on those classes. Rogue works very well as a character, as a dip, supporting the things that other classes are trying to do. 2 levels of Spore Druid can increase your damage with per attack significantly by adding damage dice from Symbiotic Entity. 1 level of Bard can enhance your skill selection even more and make you even better at passing skill checks. The possibilities with multiclassing rogues are honestly endless, because they multiclass just about better than just about any other character in the game. But the ones that will really power up your rogue as a rogue are going to be 5 levels of fighter or 5 levels of ranger. So that's where I would start if you are looking to have the strongest rogue available while still getting the benefits of other classes. Like I said, go check out many of my other guides for more in-depth guides to multiclassing Rogue, but that's a basic primer for you. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the best Rogue build in Baldur's Gate 3. And of course, as always, if you have, feel free to leave a comment and like the video. Both of those things help me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really do appreciate when people take the time to do that. Really means a lot to me. And I do read every comment that I get, so if there's something that you want me to see, definitely let me know in the comments. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 guides and other strategy game content. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.